Mr. Chong Ki-hyung.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, may I address question 24 and 25
Yes,
on behalf
please.
of the Prime Minister? Mr. Speaker, we are committed to building an inclusive smart nation, one where nobody is digitally excluded. Members will be aware that a key element for the delivery of digital services is to get digital identity right. In the case of Singapore, our national digital identity is expressed through SingPass. Now, for the well over 90% of people in Singapore who have access to a smartphone, I think all of you, particularly in this house, would use SingPass through SingPass Mobile. And I would take a bet that most of us who use the SingPass Mobile have forgotten our password, because we depend on the biometric features of our smartphone to not only authenticate, but also to act as a two-factor authentication system. So these two questions really relate to the minority of Singaporeans who do not have a smartphone. You will also recollect that in the old days, I say old because it was quite many years ago, SingPass consisted of a user ID and password. And this was not secure enough. And therefore, we introduced a two-factor authentication system. The two-factor authentication system, the second factor was delivered either through an SMS or through a token. We call it the one-key token. The challenge with delivering an SMS is that it requires someone to have a phone. Otherwise, the SMS message, the one-time password, will not reach you, or to use a token. The token will be phased out, and the last day of use will be the 31st of March, 2021. Therefore, these two questions relate to the small minority of people without a smartphone, without a mobile phone, and for whom the use of the token as a second factor authentication will not be available from the 1st of April this year. I want to emphasize that when we design our digital services, we design them to be accessible, secure, and convenient. And we therefore have to have this assurance that after the 31st of March this year, these services will continue to be available for everyone, just as it has been today. So let me explain how we are adapting our system. The first thing is, I think many members of this House may not be aware of this new system which we've rolled out called facial verification. This allows users who do not have a mobile phone to log into the SingPass system without the help of a third party. And they do so by using an internet-enabled computer with a webcam for short. The webcam allows the computer to scan your face. The system then verifies that against the biometric information that the government has on all of us through ICA. That means it verifies against the face on record that we use for our identity card or our passport. So this allows people to use and log on and to authenticate to SingPass, even if they don't have a smartphone. But that requires a webcam. So the next supplementary question should ask me, what about those who don't have access to a computer with a webcam? And the answer is that if you don't have access to such a device, you can use these, you can access it through kiosks which the government has rolled out at selected public locations. These locations include all CPF service centers, IRAS Taxpayer and Business Service Center, our Tampines Hub's Public Service Center, Geylang Public East Library. I'm just going through a list, but this list is going to keep expanding. So in other words, even if you don't have a computer with a webcam, don't worry, there is still a physical counter which you can access. The next point I would make is that the other modification we've introduced is what we call multi-user SMS two-factor authentication, in which users can opt and nominate to have their SMS one-time password sent to another SingPass user who has a mobile phone. This allows a resident, remember, without a smartphone, without a mobile phone, to continue to access services with the help of a trusted family member. For this mode to work, obviously, the keyword is trust, and our system has to make sure that it also protects privacy and security. Now, how do we do that? Before the nomination of a trusted party is activated, there is a strict process for us to ensure that we have verified identities of both persons, the nominator and the trusted party, explain to them the use of them, and to obtain, very importantly, obtain consent. I would also emphasize that the person who is nominated would only get the one-time password. That person does not have access to the services which the actual user is logging on, does not have access to the information or the transactions that the actual user is transacting in. Next point is that we will provide help for all those who need it, so that they will always be able to have access and skills for an increasingly digitalized environment. Basically, we have to put our money where our mouth is and ensure that no one is excluded simply because of lack of resources. So for instance, we have the Home Access Scheme, which subsidizes broadband connectivity and a smartphone or a tablet for lower income households, especially focused on low-income seniors. So our low-income seniors can go to a SG Digital Community Hub to apply for support under the Mobile Access for Seniors scheme, which offers eligible seniors a subsidized smartphone and a mobile plan. The subsidized smartphone starts from as low as $20, the mobile plan from as low as $5 a month. And I'm sure if someone can't afford that, if they see their local MP, we will find ways to help people. So don't worry about access to equipment or devices. But actually, the greater challenge is skills, digital skills. And that's why we have the SG Digital Office, which is supporting seniors to pick up these skills, including the most important skill is how to use SingPass Mobile. And again, if you've observed the digital clinics in our community clubs, you'll notice that that's almost 101, the first lesson which is provided. And for those who need it, we will also provide in-person support at the 55 SG Digital Community Hubs at our community clubs and libraries island-wide, and at PA's Tech Connect initiative and integrated public service centers. Finally, for those who truly require a physical means to access public services, we will make sure that physical counters remain available. Whilst the government is working towards the digital delivery of all government services, we will also ensure that everyone always has access to all these services. Thank you.
Mr. Jerogam.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister has said that the people who are not able to use SingPass right now because of the phasing out of the one key token are in a minority, which is true. But many in this minority are the elderly, the less educated, and the disabled. So although they are a minority, they must not find themselves excluded because of the phasing out of this one key token. For example, face verification can be done only if the user is physically present at these counters that the minister has explained. However, residents who are physically disabled and who are physically will find themselves having difficulty visiting the counters. And I understand that there are other methods of logging in, but none of these fully replace the one key token, which allows users to log in independently without a mobile phone. So will GovTech consider introducing other 2FA methods that don't require users to have a mobile phone or be physically present at counters? Secondly, I also note that several locations like the IRA service centers will have the counters that provide the SingPass face verification. Can such counters also be extended to all social service officers? Because many of residents who visit the SSOs are not tech savvy, but they need to log into the SingPass to retrieve supporting documents like CPF statements and HDB statements. And lastly, will residents without a recent photo on record at ICA be able to be matched by the face verification algorithm?
I thank the member for the questions, but in fact, that's precisely the point. I've gone to great lengths to explain how the system will work, even without access to a smartphone, without access to a mobile phone, and how you can either have someone else whom you rely on as a trusted party to be the mediator of the second factor authentication, as well as a new method which we call facial recognition. My point is that we totally agree with you that we must make sure no one is excluded, and that no one is worse off in the face of the inevitable progress of digital technology. I also want to reiterate the point I made earlier, that the key thing actually is not hardware or devices. It's really trust, confidence, digital literacy. And for this, I think I will also say, I think from all of your experience, hand-holding is necessary. And that's why the SG Digital Office, and the more we can roll that out on the ground, accessible, so that someone is there to hold your hand and explain and teach the person, the better. So you have my assurance that we will continue to roll this out, and your suggestion on social service centers, I think we will look at it. This is part of the delivery of government services at the retail level. What was your third point? Sorry, I want to make sure I answer him accurately.
Thank you. I was asking if residents without a recent photo on record,
yes.
the government will be able to be matched by the recognition algorithm.
Thank you. That's a valid point. I think you will also now realize why ICA has been fastidiously reminding people at a certain age to update your photos, so that the photo on record is a recent one. And I would also add that also because Singaporeans are quite well traveled, at least until 2020 came along. If all of you were to log on to your SingPass mobile now and look at your national digital ID, you will realize that that photograph has been updated to your latest passport photograph. But nevertheless, your point is valid. We need to make sure we've got updated photos. But I would also add this additional point, that the digital systems actually are fairly robust and are able to identify even if we've got more eye bags and wrinkles and gray hair on our visages. Thank you.
Mr. Chong Ki-hyung.
Supplementary questions. The first one is, I'm glad to hear that physical counters will still be around to help those who really do not have the skill sets to do it, and also to minimize the risk. They want to do it themselves rather than relying on someone to key in the SingPass word for them. So my first supplementary question is there a timeline where physical counters would be phased out? My second question is that how would the government ensure that the private sector also maintain access to services which do not require SingPass, especially for the senior citizens? Because I get feedback from citizens, senior citizens, that to open a bank account now, going to the counter with an identity card is not good enough. They still need to go through the SingPass route. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Those are two very salient supplementary questions. Is there a timeline to phase out physical counters? If you ask me, I would believe there is no timeline to phase out physical counters because there will always be a need for some contact, some hand-holding, some training, some engagement. Now, how and where that physical counters are expressed on the ground will vary with time. Today, the common ones we're all used to is community clubs, libraries, and other suggestions. I think that list will evolve, but I do not see a time when we will eliminate all physical counters and human-to-human interactions. Your next point was on the private sector. And here, this is another important question, because the example that you cited, opening a bank account, it used to be that you show up at the bank with an IC or a passport, and maybe if you had for those of us old enough to have a POSB account with stamps and all that, there was a track record, and it seemed quite seamless to open a bank account. Actually, that same capability is available today, but banks have also had to keep up with the times, both in terms of the digital possibilities which have opened up, as well as the dangers of fraud and impersonation in the new world. And that's why you'll find that today, most banks, in fact, I think all our local banks, when you actually are opening a new account, will try their best to get you to also use the SingPass. The reason why they also want to use SingPass is because of this other module which we call MyInfo, which means the government, as the ultimate custodian or a source of truth, of trusted data, that I am who I am, I exist, my details, address, and so on and so forth. You realize many times now you don't need to keep filling up forms repeatedly, because the private sector wants to have access, with consent, to those fields of data which government verifies. And that's why the banks today will prefer that you use SingPass Mobile and that you authorize them so that they can get the data that they need in a way which they feel is more accurate. So the point I'm trying to make is that these are possibilities which emerge because we are a smart nation, because we use the digital tools available. But even as we do this, we must make sure nobody gets left behind. And that's why the focus on training, on hand-holding, on physical counters, to get people past this hurdle. So thank you for that very important point.